There's a version of military policy, specifically, around targeted killing,
Right.
that you will almost never see.
Right.
It doesn't have that slick, grainy strike footage that always seems to make it onto the news to show precision.
No confirmation reports, no victory laps.
Just the opposite, really. It's the version where the machinery breaks.
And that's a place we rarely get to look, honestly. When we analyze policy, we're almost always trained to look at the intended result, the success.
We look at the stats.
Exactly. We look at the stats. But today, we're doing something, well, fundamentally different. We're looking at the noise.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating and, I have to say, a pretty unsettling set of documents. They're titled The List: How Targeted Killing Became Policy.
A heavy topic.
It is.
Yeah.
But we're zeroing in on a very specific part, episode 6, which is subtitled, If It Had Failed.
And looking at the source material here, the authors, they describe what we're about to do as a controlled inversion.
A controlled inversion. That sounds like something out of a physics textbook, not geopolitics. What does that actually mean for you, for me, for the listener?
It's a useful way to think about it so we don't get lost in just, what ifs.
Right.
The idea is that we aren't just speculating. We are taking the exact same system, the same logic, the same tech that governs these policies right now, but we're just flipping the outcome.
So we're asking, what happens when it all goes wrong?
Exactly. Because, as the source points out, the system is designed to avoid these failures, and not necessarily for moral reasons.
But to ensure the system itself survives.
That's it. It's about self-preservation.
That seems to be the core tension then. We think of these things, drone warfare, targeted strikes, we think of surgical precision.
The missile through the window?
A missile through the window, yeah. But this deep dive is really about the machinery of failure. So where does it start? My mind immediately goes to, like a Hollywood movie, a sniper misses a shot, a missile hits 5 feet to the left.
And that's a common misconception, one that actually helps keep the whole system a bit opaque.
Okay.
According to these documents, failure rarely begins with a kinetic mistake, the physical act of the weapon missing. The tech is usually too good for that. The failure begins much, much earlier.
How much earlier?
It begins with assumptions.
Assumptions in the intelligence phase, before anyone even pushes a button.
Exactly. Think about how these target packages are built. The whole system relies on a set of stable variables. You assume, for instance, that the target is alone.
Okay.
You assume their patterns of life, going to the market at 9 a.m., visiting a specific house on Tuesdays, that those patterns still apply. You assume the environment hasn't changed.
You're basically taking a snapshot in time and just hoping it's still true 10 minutes later.
Right. And the source uses a really specific term for this. It calls it drift. Yeah. And I find this concept fascinating. If even one of those factors, the environment, the pattern, the people they're with, if it shifts or drifts, the system doesn't just, shut down. It doesn't abort. It leaks.
It leaks. That's a very disturbing image. It sounds like the air is seeping in before anyone even knows it's there.
Think of it like a gas leak. You don't smell it right away. The system is still running. The drone is still in the air. All the permissions are still valid.
But the reality on the ground has drifted.
It's drifted away from the reality on the screen. Maybe the target picked up their kid from school. Maybe the meeting got moved. The data is just leaking validity with every passing second.
And that gets to maybe the most terrifying detail in this entire document. It's about how they actually know who they're targeting. I think most of us imagine facial recognition, right? A green box appears around a face.
Like in the movies, yeah. But the source says, and this is a direct quote, identity is inferred. It's a polite word for an educated guess. I mean, in so many of these scenarios, there is no visual confirmation of a face. You aren't looking at a person. Identity is built using proxies.
Proxies, so things that stand in for the actual person.
Exactly. The big one is shared electronics, SIM cards, family proximity, who they hang out with. You aren't really tracking a person, you're tracking a digital signature.
You're tracking a SIM card that usually belongs to the target.
Usually. Or a phone that's usually in their pocket.
Yeah.
And that's where the leak we talked about becomes so incredibly dangerous. Because if you're targeting a phone, and that phone gets handed to a cousin,
or sold, or just left in a car,
then the inferred identity is wrong. The math still works, the signal is perfect, the location is precise, but the person is wrong.
And that's what the source calls the irreversible error.
Yes, and it makes a really vital distinction here. The most dangerous failure isn't missing the target, it's hitting the wrong target perfectly.
Because there's no undo button.
It's deeper than that, even. The source notes there's a lack of a correction mechanism. Think about our legal system. If you arrest the wrong person, you can release them.
There are appeals. You can metabolize the error.
You can, however flawed the system is. But once the wrong person is killed based on an inferred identity, the error is permanent. The system can't process it. It just jams the gears.
And that permanence, that's what triggers everything else. Because normally, these operations are designed to be, well, invisible. They talk about the shield of deniability.
Oh, absolutely. That's standard procedure. No uniforms, no flags on the drone, no official statements. If it goes right, for all anyone knows, it never even happened.
But when it goes wrong, when you hit that wrong target, the ghost becomes visible.
That's the exact metaphor they use. In deniability, it's a fragile shield. It works against accusations, but it shatters the second physical evidence survives.
What kind of evidence are we talking about?
The source lists a few specific things. Witnesses, of course. Captured personnel, if it's that kind of op. But the one that really stands out is recovered fragments.
Pieces of the weapon itself.
Exactly. A piece of a circuit board. A control fin. A bit of fuselage with a serial number on it. That one piece of debris acts like a forensic signature. It completely destroys the no flags argument.
You can't deny a serial number that traces back to a factory in Ohio.
You can't say it wasn't us when there's a purchase order stamped on the debris.
So the moment that piece of metal is found and photographed, the whole game changes.
Completely. The source says it very clearly. At that point, the question is no longer operational, it becomes diplomatic.
Okay, let's unpack that. Diplomatic sounds so polite, but here it sounds like a crisis. When that shield shatters, what happens next? It's not just an angry press release, is it?
No. You're entering what the source calls the escalation path. And this is where it gets really complicated. You might think, okay, does this mean war?
Right, do they fire back?
But escalation here rarely mirrors the original act. It's not, you bombed us, so we bomb you back. It's not symmetrical.
So it spreads out. It's not eye for an eye.
It spreads. It becomes asymmetrical. The source describes it like a web. You see proxy retaliation where they hit you back through a third party to maintain their own deniability.
Yeah.
Or you see legal action in international courts. Or, and this is happening more and more, an attack on infrastructure or a cyber asset.
So a failed strike in one country could lead to a bank's servers getting wiped in another country 3 weeks later.
Potentially. Or a port shutdown. Or a kidnapping. The point is the unpredictability. When the operation is secret, you control the variables. When it goes public because it failed, you lose control. The escalation ladder isn't a straight line up, it's a web that expands in every direction.
And speaking of things coming back around, there's this concept in the text that I found. Chilling. The precedent turns around.
Yes. The boomerang effect. It argues that every justification a major power uses for a targeted killing becomes, well, it becomes reusable.
Reusable. That's the key word there. It's like open source code for warfare.
In a way, it's legal code. If I claim I have the right to strike a threat in another country because of self-defense or an imminent threat,
Wow.
then you've just handed that exact legal argument to every other nation on Earth.
You've written the permission slip for them.
Mm-hmm.
If this kind of killing is lawful under certain conditions for you, then another country can just claim the same conditions. And they will.
Different definitions, different targets, same logic. That's the quote.
Precisely. You might define a terrorist one way. Another country might decide a political dissident is a terrorist or a journalist. But they can use the exact same legal structure, that same imminent threat language, to justify their actions.
Wow.
The failure, the visibility of it, it exposes that logic to the world, and suddenly you've normalized it for everyone. You can't really complain when someone else uses the tool you built. It's not about right or wrong, it's about setting the rules for a game that you might end up losing down the road.
And it's not just international. The source also brings this discussion back to the home front.
Right. Domestic blowback. Because generally, the public tends to support these policies, or at least they ignore them. Why?
It's not just apathy. It's by design. They ignore them because they're invisible. Public support depends on that invisibility.
But when a strike goes wrong,
Visibility skyrockets. Suddenly it's on the news. There are photos of, a wedding party that was hit or a cafe.
and that's when the questions start.
That's when the questions start. People demand oversight. Congress gets involved. The system is dragged into a public space it was never built to survive in. These programs are designed for the dark. They wither in the light because the logic, it just doesn't hold up to public scrutiny.
So if I'm hearing this right, the failure isn't just that a target got away. The real failure is that the method gets exposed. The failure burns the tool.
Correct. And that leads to the international aftershock. It's not just your enemies reacting, it's your allies.
Right. The source mentions allies reconsidering cooperation. Why would they pull back?
Think about the liability. If you're a host country letting drones fly from your airbase, or you're sharing intelligence, you're doing it with the assumption of discretion.
You assume the operator isn't going to make a public mess on your doorstep.
Exactly. But if they fail and create an international incident, you, the ally, are now an accomplice. Your own population gets angry. So what happens? Airspace closes. Intel sharing slows to a trickle.
What was once efficient becomes constrained.
Yes. The geopolitical friction just grinds everything to a halt because the trust and competence is gone. You become a risky partner.
You know, we've talked a lot about the strategic mechanics of this, but there's a heavy section here on the moral cost. And it's framed in a really interesting way. It calls it a moral shortcut.
This is a profound point. The source argues that the failure exposes a moral shortcut. Not just because killing occurred. I mean, killing happens in war. It's because there is no avenue for accountability.
Right. No trial, no jury, no defense.
And, crucially, when it goes wrong, there's no reversal. There is no apology that can fix it. The system offers a shortcut around the messy, difficult business of justice arrests, evidence, courts. But when that shortcut leads off a cliff, you're just left in a moral wasteland. You haven't done justice, you've just committed violence.
Which leads to this really cynical but very clear summary of why the system works this way. The source says it avoids failure, not out of morality and not out of transparency.
No, it prioritizes control. And why? Because success maintains silence, and silence preserves legitimacy.
That is a chilling line. Legitimacy doesn't come from being right, it comes from nobody talking about it.
In this specific context, yes. If no one knows it happened, no one can question it. The moment it fails and becomes loud, that legitimacy just evaporates.
So let's pivot toward the end of this analysis. We need to talk about restraint. Usually that word makes you think of mercy, or taking the high road.
But the source completely redefines it here. In the context of this policy, restraint does not mean stopping the operations. It's not about being good.
So what does it mean?
It means calibrating failure probability.
What kind of calculation?
It's a mathematical calculation. It means keeping the risk of a public failure low enough that the world never notices what you're doing. You exercise restraint only to the degree necessary to keep that cloak of invisibility.
So you take the shot if there's a 10% chance of being caught, but maybe not if it's 50%.
That's the logic. The goal isn't to save lives, per se. The goal is to keep the probability of a public failure below the threshold of global attention. It's actuarial warfare.
And that explains why the policy survived. The source is very clear about this. It didn't become policy because it was perfect or precise.
No, it survived because it rarely failed publicly. Its real strength wasn't precision. Its strength was invisibility. It let nations project power without projecting the image of war.
It's just amazing to think about how much of the modern world rests on things simply not being seen, on the silence holding.
It brings us to the final argument in the source. In this world, success isn't defined as victory. You don't plant a flag and have a parade.
Success is defined as containment.
Containment. Keeping the conflict in its box. Keeping the escalation from spinning out of control. Keeping retaliation from becoming an open war.
And that brings us to the final lingering thought. It mentions the list. We think of a kill list as the names of people who were removed.
But the source flips that too. It says the list is remembered not for the names on it, but for the disasters that didn't happen.
The wars that didn't start.
The open retaliation that never came, the public reckonings that were avoided, the alliances that held together.
Because the containment helped.
Exactly. As long as the containment holds, the list remains. It operates in the shadow of the failure that never happened. It's a very strange way to measure success, by the absence of catastrophe.
It really makes you wonder about the news we don't hear. We scroll our feeds, we see the conflicts that boiled over, the noise. But this suggests the real architecture of our world is built on the things that stayed silent. The near misses, the calculations that kept that leak from becoming a flood.
And that's the paradox, isn't it? We feel safest when we see nothing, but it's in that nothingness that these systems grow. It creates a reality where we're insulated from the methods used to protect us, for better or for worse.
A huge thank you to the authors of the list for this incredible and yes, slightly terrifying look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It definitely changes how you read a quiet headline.
It certainly does. It makes you listen to the silence a little differently.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.